At 10 o'clock, the news now on BBC One with Rita Chakrabarti.
Tonight at 10, a week on from the Manchester attack, police launch an appeal to the public for fresh information about the bomber. It comes as new footage obtained by the BBC shows Salman Abedi shopping a day before the bombing, and police release an image of him with a suitcase. The investigation this afternoon focused on a landfill site searching for evidence. And it emerged today that MI5 is to hold an inquiry into the way it dealt with warnings from the public that Abedi was a potential threat. Also tonight, with 10 days before the general election, Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May face a studio audience and a grilling. In Yemen, a steep rise in the number of deaths from cholera. We have a special report. After 2 days of airport chaos, the boss of British Airways says he won't resign.
Get down, ship!
Tributes to the Blue Peter presenter John Noakes, who's died at the age of 83. And the multi-million-pound penalty that saw Huddersfield Town promoted to the Premier League. Good evening. A week on from the Manchester attack, police are urging anyone with information about the bomber to get in touch. It comes as the BBC obtained CCTV footage appearing to show Salman Abedi shopping in a convenience store the day before the attack, in which 22 people were killed. Police have released an image of him with a blue suitcase and have appealed for anyone who might have seen him with it in the 4 days leading up to the bombing to come forward. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, June Kelly.
A young man in a hooded top, jogging pants and trainers on his own on a Sunday morning shop. In this footage obtained by the BBC, he looks relaxed as he's captured on CCTV browsing the shelves of the Manchester convenience store. His till receipt shows he spent £8.74 and he bought almonds, tuna, scouring pads and air fresheners. This was the day before the bombing, and staff in the shop believe this was Salman Abedi.
Looking at that CCTV, it's the same guy that's been in the shop several times in the past. He looks exactly like the guy that they're saying that has done the bombings. His eyes stand out so much from the guy that we recognise from the past.
Here you can see his face, and this is an image released by the police. In the police pictures, he appears to be wearing some of the same clothes. By this stage, he has the bomb on his back and is on the verge of committing mass murder. Tonight, police released this new image of him in Manchester city centre on the day of the attack. They're trying to find his blue suitcase. They say they have no reason to believe it contains anything dangerous, but they're asking anyone who sees it to be cautious. Early today, their investigation expanded to the south coast. In the Sussex town of Shoreham-by-Sea, officers arrested a 23-year-old man. He's said to be a Libyan trainee pilot. Since the bombing, there has been criticism of the security service MI5. It's to be drawn on possible missed opportunities.
It's right that the MI5 are going to be able to look back and find out what has happened in the past, but at the moment I'm going to focus on making sure that we get the operation concluded, and successfully so.
But after the Arena atrocity, some are questioning whether an intelligence agency should be investigating itself. In the north of England, there have been more searches at new locations. This was Whalley Range in Manchester.
I think they're Libyans, but I don't know much about them. They collect our parcels, we collect their parcels.
And in Bury this afternoon, this was the scene of one of the latest searches, a landfill site close to a motorway, an illustration of the size and scope of the police investigation. Officers are also going through thousands of hours of CCTV as they work to build a picture of the bomber and those close to him. June Kelly, BBC News, Manchester.
And we'll have more on the Manchester bombing a little later in the programme. After a general election campaign dominated in the last few days by the issue of security, the debate stepped up a gear tonight, with Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn taking questions from a studio audience and facing a grilling by Jeremy Paxman. Both party leaders faced tough questions on Brexit, on public spending and on security, as our political correspondent Alex Forsyth reports.
A smile on arrival, but she knows what's at stake. This time in 10 days, the country will have decided, does she stay in Downing Street? Could he get the keys to number 10? Tonight, both took part in a televised grilling, trying to prove they've got what it takes. First, the Labour leader faced questions from the audience. He was asked immediately about his approach to foreign policy and security and his stance on the IRA.
You have openly supported the IRA in the past, and I can give you an example. Attending a commemoration for the 8 IRA men who were killed at Loughgall. Now, in your words, it was to honour them. Maybe you can share with the electorate why those IRA men were actually killed.
The commemoration I think you're referring to was a meeting I was at in London where there was a period of silence for everyone who had died in Northern Ireland. The contribution I made to that meeting was to call for a peace and dialogue process in Northern Ireland. It's only by dialogue and process we brought about the peace in Northern Ireland.
Next, quizzed on immigration, Brexit, his leadership skills and policies.
This country is badly divided between the richest and the poorest. You put corporate tax and tax at the top end down, the division gets greater. Are you happy that so many of our children are going to school with supersized classes? So many of our children are going to school hungry.
In a one-to-one interview, he was asked whether he'd authorise a drone strike.
I think you have to look at all the evidence that's there, but you can't answer a hypothetical question without the evidence around it.
But it's not really hypothetical.
It's a completely hypothetical
with David
question.
Cameron and Jihadi John.
It's a completely hypothetical question.
Then it was Theresa May's turn. She's avoided head-to-head debates with other party leaders. Tonight, the audience proved tough opponents. She was asked about her plans to shake up social care funding.
So why, Prime Minister, should we, in my generation, vote for you?
So what happens is people are paying for care. People are finding that they are having to sell their house. Many people are having to sell their house to pay those care bills. And many find that they're not able to leave the money to their families. Now, I want to take those risks away, and that's what the proposals I've put forward are about. It's about ensuring that nobody is going to have to sell their house to pay for care in their lifetime.
She confirmed there would be a cap on care costs, but refused to say what it would be before being asked about health funding, police funding and school funding.
Nobody can guarantee the real terms per pupil funding increase. In the Labour Party's manifesto, we know the figures don't add up. What is important is that as we look...
Clearly failed.
Just please let the Prime Minister answer.
Sorry. What we need to do is to ensure we will put those record levels of funding into schools.
The Prime Minister's been keen to talk Brexit and got her chance, challenged about backing Remain during the campaign.
So you have changed your mind, have you?
We gave people the choice.
You've changed your mind?
I'll answer that in a minute. We gave people the choice, Jeremy, and the British people decided to leave the European Union. Yeah. And I think it's important for them to see their politicians delivering on that choice and respecting the will of the people.
Backstage, the big hitters were out, trying to downplay shaky moments and talk up their candidates. But what they think matters little. The only verdict that counts, the vote in just 10 days' time. Alex Forsyth, BBC News.
Well, let's join Ben Wright, our political correspondent, who's outside the debate studio for us now. And Ben, it's 10 days till the election. This was effectively a resetting of the respective campaigns. How did they do?
Yeah, that's right, Rita. It's just finished in the last couple of minutes, the event here, and it did feel as if the election was being rebooted. And I think coming into this, the two party leaders had several aims. Number one, of course, to land their core campaign messages. Secondly, in front of a live studio audience, avoid any gaffe, any embarrassing, awkward skirmish with a member of the audience that would dominate all the headlines. And I think number three, of course, as Alex said, convince undecided voters who are still weighing up this choice. I think Jeremy Corbyn had a particular challenge to look prime ministerial. I mean, in polls, he clearly lags behind Theresa May when it comes to this question of leadership. And I think Team Corbyn will have been pleased with how he came across. He was assured, he was confident. He wasn't rattled by any of the potentially difficult questions around his past relationship with Sinn Féin, for instance, or Hamas, or how he would or would not use the nuclear deterrent. And I think the audience warmed to him a bit. On domestic issues, he said he would like to see immigration come down, but wouldn't give a number. Theresa May's turn after that, and it was, as Alex said, I think a harder encounter for the Prime Minister, perhaps not surprisingly, because of course the Tories have been in government for 7 years, so there is a record to interrogate. And she was asked about school funding, about police numbers. Wasn't always easy for her, but nor was she thrown off course. Just towards the end, she was asked about Brexit. Of course, she wouldn't give a number, how much she was prepared to pay in terms of the divorce bill that Britain is about to be asked to pay. She restated her view that no deal would be better than a bad deal without explaining exactly what no deal would look like. So I think as they leave here, they'll both be pretty pleased. It didn't do either of them any harm.
Ben, many thanks. The chief executive of British Airways, Alex Cruz, says he won't resign over the computer failure which disrupted tens of thousands of people's travel over the bank holiday weekend. In his first interview since the IT crash, Mr. Cruz apologised, saying a power surge had caused computer failure and that a backup system hadn't kicked in. BA services today returned to normal at Gatwick, but not at Heathrow. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
How can a computer glitch be allowed to cripple an entire airline? Spoilt holidays, weddings, honeymoons. 3 days in, the British Airways boss has broken cover to give his first interview, admitting their backup system failed.
The actual problem only lasted a few minutes. So there was a power surge and there was a backup system which did not work at that particular point in time. It was restored after a few hours in terms of some hardware changes, but eventually it took a long time for messaging and for systems to come up again.
Well, 3 days in and Terminal 5 here is getting back to something like normality. But it's one thing sorting out the immediate problem and getting people on their aircraft. It's going to take BA far longer to ease people's anger at the way they handled the whole situation. The meltdown hit 75,000 passengers across the world, each with a different story, but one main complaint. No one was telling them what was going on.
You've got to do a lot better though, haven't you, in terms of communicating with people? Because that is the number one. People accept there are problems sometimes. That is the number one thing that grates people.
We're fully aware that communications have to get better, particularly as social media continues to expand. So yes, I agree with you that we will continue to invest in resources in ways in which we can actually directly reach out to people.
BA made hundreds of IT staff redundant recently, outsourcing their jobs to India to save money. It's led to accusations there aren't enough experienced UK staff left to cope with a crisis.
Let me put this to Mr. Cruz. If they were still BA employees, we can assure him that issue would have been resolved in minutes and the systems would be up and running.
When I put it to Mr. Cruz, he flatly denied that outsourcing had made any difference.
So totally unconnected, completely unconnected with all of those redundancies and with the outsourcing of the IT system.
Absolutely yes, in this case.
Apart from some short-haul flights from Heathrow, BA managed to fly most of its passengers today. Some still can't believe how badly the airline messed up.
I work in IT and they're blaming this on IT problems. It's basic enterprise practice to have a disaster recovery solution. They should have had their communication system and their booking system in different places so they could at least send us an email.
One estimate has put the compensation bill at around £150 million. You can't put a price on the damage to their reputation. Richard Westcott, BBC News, Heathrow.
2 years of war in Yemen have created what the UN has described as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. As well as impending famine, the country is also facing an unprecedented outbreak of cholera. In the past month, 52,000 cases of suspected cholera have been reported, and the World Health Organization believes that figure could rise to 300,000 within 6 months. There have been almost 500 reported deaths in the past month alone. That's 3 times more than during the previous 6 months. Our correspondent Nawal Al-Maghafi has this special report on a devastating new crisis hitting the people of Yemen.
Frail, weak and fighting for their lives. These are the faces of Yemen's latest crisis. Preying on the weak and hungry. Cholera has rapidly spread throughout the country. This hospital, already crippled by war, is overwhelmed. Badra and her family arrived in the capital after their town was heavily bombed. She hoped her children would be safe in the city, but 2 days after moving here, their lives are at risk again.
The kids went to play, and then they started cleaning the rubbish outside. My son washed his hands, but just after dinner, he got really sick.
Yemen is a country broken by war and hunger. A place where the young and old become the first victims. It's always been poor, but 2 years of fighting has left it unable to cope with this emergency.
The war has meant that everything is deteriorating, especially the health system. There are no medicines, no access to clean water. It's catastrophic.
Outside, the patients keep coming. But without spare beds, they're treated in the courtyard. With over 200 new cases arriving each day to this hospital alone, makeshift tents have been set up to deal with the numbers. Cholera is cheap and easy to treat. But the UN says the delivery of aid has been slowed down by both sides, which means supplies don't reach the people in need. So far, the outbreak has killed over 400 people. Abdul's wife is the latest victim. He buried her here just yesterday. She was so malnourished, her body wasn't able to fight the disease. She was 21 years old.
Her situation deteriorated, so we rushed her to the hospital. They couldn't help her. We took her to another hospital, but by then it was too late. Everything in our life together was so lovely. She was so kind. Our time together was too short.
Abdul was left widowed, and his 6-month-old son without a mother. With no peace in sight, Yemen's war will continue to tear families apart. Nawal Al-Makhafi, BBC News.
The French President Emmanuel Macron says he told the Russian leader Vladimir Putin that any use of chemical weapons in Syria would result in immediate French reprisals. President Macron said they aired their disagreements in the meeting, but he also described wanting to work with Russia over Syria and in the struggle against terrorism. China has urged North Korea to create the conditions for a return to talks after Pyongyang carried out its 9th missile test this year. North Korea defied UN sanctions by firing a short-range missile into the sea off its eastern coast. Hamerton Park Zoo in Cambridgeshire has confirmed that a female zookeeper was killed in what's been described as a freak accident involving a tiger. The park will be closed tomorrow while investigations continue, as Ben Ando reports.
Police said the female zookeeper, who has not yet been named, was mauled to death by one of the park's tigers inside their enclosure. It's not yet known exactly how. The park was busy with bank holiday visitors, and several posted photographs as the Magpas Air ambulance landed. Those in the park were led away, though some people said they were allowed back in for a short period before the park was closed by zoo officials, who later handed out a short statement which said, "This appears to have been a freak accident. At no point during the incident did any animals escape their enclosures, and at no point was public safety affected in any way." 9 years ago, a cheetah escaped through a broken electric fence. It was later recaptured nearby, and no one was hurt. The forensics vans have now left. The police say there are no suspicious circumstances surrounding what happened. A full investigation is underway in the zoo, where this evening the animals are being prepared for the night. The gates are locked and the zoo says it will stay closed tomorrow. Ben Ando, BBC News, Cambridgeshire.
The former Blue Peter presenter John Noakes has died at the age of 83. He hosted the show in the 1960s and 70s and was its longest-serving presenter, appearing for more than 12 years. David Silito looks back at his life.
Blue Peter's had many presenters over the years, but John Noakes, the cheery, funny daredevil from Halifax, was special.
At this level, the plinth on which Nelson stands overhangs the column. I found myself literally hanging from the ladder with nothing at all beneath me.
In an age with a rather relaxed attitude to health and safety, the words, "and then it was my turn," led to some startling TV moments. His trip down the Cresta Run was also terrifying.
I thumped onto the ice and carried on down the track on my backside, still doing around 80 miles an hour.
John Noakes had started out in the RAF before turning to acting and landing the job on Blue Peter. The Yorkshire accent and the willingness to do anything for a laugh stood out in a rather more formal era of children's television.
I think for a lot of people, today is a very sad day. We've lost him, and he looked pretty eternal from when I was sitting as a child. We've lost our childhoods too a bit. In those days there were only 2 channels, and he was the whole of the BBC to me when I was watching.
Shep, don't bite him! He's a nice little fella. Hey, that's enough.
After 12 years, he and his dog Shep were part of national life. But he had tired of the risks and the workload and was happy to move on. He set off on a yacht and eventually settled in Mallorca. Off-screen, he was rather more shy and serious. The John Noakes we knew was in many ways an act.
Johnny always had to have a character to play, and so he invented that John Noakes. Not very different from him, but it was an extension of him, and it was a John Noakes that could do the things that he did on television, which the real John Noakes wouldn't do.
His skydiving was record-breaking and almost went wrong. And his meeting with a baby elephant, a little TV landmark.
Oh, get off my foot!
Lulu hadn't stood on his foot, but John Noakes always knew how to get a laugh. Millions of us are today saying goodbye to a much-loved part of childhood.
The former Blue Peter presenter John Noakes, who's died at the age of 83. UKIP's Paul Nuttall was the latest party leader to face questions from Andrew Neil. Speaking about counter-terrorism, Mr Nuttall said he wouldn't rule out internment for terror suspects, saying that politicians had to look at ways of ensuring that people were safe.
When you read this morning that there is a suspected 23,000 jihadis who could be living amongst us, obviously MI5 are stretched to capacity at this present moment in time. I think we've got to look at ways of ensuring that our people are safe, whether that is a return to... Hold on, let me finish. Whether that is a return to control orders, whether that is tagging these people, or who knows, in the future, maybe a return to internment.
More on the election now, and Penzance in the constituency of St Ives has some of the poorest areas in Cornwall. It was one of the hardest fought seats in the last election when the Conservatives took it from the Liberal Democrats. Our South West political editor Martin Oates has been taking in the view from Penzance to assess the Liberal Democrats' chances this time round.
Luminous skies, water as far as the eye can see, and even a fairy tale castle emerging from the waves. Welcome to Penzance, home to the poorest council estate in the poorest county. At the heart of the Trenier estate is this soup kitchen.
There are more and more people living in food poverty, and what's happening here, I believe, is being replicated across the country.
Rosemary's been helping to cook today's lunch.
We are a hard-working county, you know, and we look after our own, but we can't do it all. And we need somebody to stand up for us in Parliament and, you know, give us the help that we need.
Like seats across the southwest, the St Ives constituency saw a Lib Dem MP replaced by a Tory at the last election.
I've been a Lib Dem all my life, and I was absolutely gutted and amazed with what happened last time round. This time, will it change? I don't think so. It's a shoo-in, isn't it? It's a Conservative shoo-in, and that's that.
Are you going to vote, and have you made up your mind who for?
The Lib Dem, that's who we're voting for, yeah. I think our candidate is going to do more for us down here than any of the others that have been MPs.
So you think the Lib Dem candidate's got a real chance?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Well, I'm going to go with May.
Why do you think Theresa May...
I think she needs a chance. Like we need a chance with the EU, to get out of that. England should stand on its own 2 feet. Simple as that.
But while some may be dancing to the Brexit tune, others still have discordant memories of the coalition government.
I used to support Lib Dem when I was young, but yes, they did a coalition with the Tories, and I want the Tories gone. And I also think Jeremy Corbyn can create enough of an easement with people just to shift consciousness a little bit.
The tightest fight in Cornwall between the Tories and the Lib Dems took place here last time. This time, the Lib Dems will have a lot of hopes riding on this constituency. But whoever wins the privilege of representing this place in Parliament will also take on some responsibility for turning around an economy still haunted by the decline of traditional industries. After 20 years in a very traditional industry, fishing, Kim Coulson is now successfully doing something completely different.
As wine industry is introduced to a region, if that is given the support to grow from governments, there's a huge growth and a huge impact to the economic situation of that region. We really need that in Cornwall.
The Cornish wine industry looks set for a bright future. But can the same be said for Cornwall's Liberal Democrats? Martin Oates, BBC News, Penzance.
Now with all the sport, here's James.
Hello, good evening to you. Huddersfield Town have returned to the top division in English football for the first time in 45 years. They won the richest prize in the sport by beating Reading on penalties in the Championship playoff final to earn promotion to the Premier League. David Ornstein reports from Wembley.
The last game of the English season, arguably the most important, certainly the most lucrative. At stake, the final place in next season's Premier League, a prize worth at least £170 million. A year ago, Huddersfield and Reading looked more likely to be relegated than promoted, but now a royal occasion to decide who would rise to football's promised land. Huddersfield have been outside the top tier since 1972, and their hopes were not helped by finishing like this, when it looked easier for Izzy Brown to score than miss. Reading tried their luck from further out, but were no more successful. There was barely anything to choose between these sides during the regular season, and nor could they be separated in regular time here, with chances few and far between at either end. An extra 30 minutes proved just as tight, so penalties would be needed, and after Jordan Obita was denied by Danny Ward, Christopher Schindler made no mistake to send Huddersfield into dreamland. Their 45-year wait ended in the most dramatic fashion. Well, the Reading fans leaving here are distraught. They've now lost 4 playoff finals in a row. For Huddersfield, it's glory, and they can look forward to the Premier League and the enormous rewards that come with it. David Ornstein, BBC News at Wembley.
England's cricketers have been soundly beaten by South Africa in the third and final match of their one-day series. South Africa won by 7 wickets at Lord's. England never got going. Batting first at one stage, they slumped to 20 for 6 before Johnny Bairstow and debutant Toby Rowland-Jones helped them limp to a total of 153 all out. The tourists eased to victory with 21 overs to spare. England had already won the series and will have to hope that this was just a blip before the Champions Trophy, which begins later this week. Great Britain's recent struggles in their America's Cup campaign continued in Bermuda this evening as they were comprehensively beaten by France. Sir Ben Ainslie and his crew had led for the first half of the race, but a couple of mistakes handed France the initiative and the British ended up losing by 53 seconds. It was their 4th defeat in a row. Tennis, and a British number 3, Alejandro Berenet, is through to the second round of the French Open. He beat American Ryan Harrison in 4 sets. Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal were among the day's other winners. Andy Murray and Johanna Konta are due to play their first round matches tomorrow. And the British and Irish Lions are flown out for their series against the world champions New Zealand. They'll play 10 matches, including 3 tests, the first of them on June the 24th. That's all the sport. Rita.
Thank you, James. Now it's a week to the day that the city of Manchester suffered a major trauma, a bombing that claimed the lives of children and parents enjoying a night out. Our correspondent Chris Butler is in St Anne's Square for us now. Chris.
At this time, exactly 1 week ago, Ariana Grande was finishing her concert. Parents were gathering their children to go home. And just outside, a man was preparing to detonate a bomb that would claim 22 lives and change many others. There are still people being treated for their injuries in hospital, and so many others have spent the last week reliving what happened at the arena or grieving. Tonight, many have gathered here for a vigil to show their support and to pay their respects. In St Anne's Square, words mean something. Each day over the last week, the many chalk messages have washed and rubbed away. And each day, they're replaced with more messages of hope, of love, of solidarity. Many laying flowers here were there that night, at the Manchester Arena to see Ariana Grande in concert. What they hoped would be a memorable evening is now one which they can't forget.
I've had flashbacks. I've been sat in an appointment waiting to be seen, and then in the distance I've heard an ambulance coming and I've just broken out into an absolute sweat.
For each family, the sounds and scenes of that night still haunt.
It's surreal. I watch the news and to think that we were there, but then there's all those people that were, killed, injured, and we're sat here.
There are reminders everywhere of last week's attack. The Manchester Arena remains closed behind barriers, sold-out concerts have been cancelled. And outside the building, all thoughts are of those who never returned home from here.
People are going to live in fear, aren't they?
Really?
Yeah, I do, yeah. We've just been to a hotel and we've just parked our car and there was some armed police there and they were checking in corners and we got a bit panicky, didn't we? We got really panicky and we just had to get out.
The terror threat level has reduced, but this kind of police presence is still judged necessary, perhaps even just for reassurance. And people need that, including the injured. Acacia is 11 and she's only just returned home from hospital after 2 operations on her leg, which was badly injured in the bombing.
It's made me quite a frightened person, which is something that I never have been. I'm very, very wary of everything around me and my surroundings.
Manchester has experienced a week of grief and mourning. 7 days that have shaken spirits in this city. But it has been a time of unity, despite and above all. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Manchester.
Well, that's all from me. Do stay with us on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.